Welcome to the webinar Pioneering Impact, the Future of Business with Impact-Weighted Accounts. I'm Rens van Tilburg. I will be the moderator of this webinar. I'm a member of the academic Dutch think tank Sustainable Finance Lab. And from there I've seen over the last years how impact has gone from niche to mainstream. How companies and financial institutions have increasingly been setting themselves impact goals. How legislation in the European Union, like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is focusing on impact. And how we currently have global discussions on sustainability disclosure standards. And the big question with all of this is, how are we actually going to do this impact measurement and this impact management? What methodology, what kind of methodology to use? And the interesting thing is that here in Amsterdam, since 2012, a group of people has been working on that. The people from the Impact Institute and the Impact Economy Foundation, their predecessors, the True Prize, and they have developed the Impact-Weighted Accounts framework. And we have businesses here in the Netherlands that have been working with that for years now. And that's what we're going to see today. How can you actually bring this into practice? What are the lessons learned from that? And for that, we have some excellent speakers, and they can get you updated on the latest and all the lessons that they have learned. We have two panels about this, one on the practice of impact measurement and management, and another one on how to actually scale up this kind of work. We also have three short keynotes, and the first one, that's where we start with, from Werner Schouten, the director of the Impact Economy Foundation. Werner, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to be talking about impact accounting today, because it not only transforms how we do business, it also redefines value and success in the economy. It makes sure that we integrate impact into the heart of our business decision-making. It's the opportunity of the century, allowing organizations not just to steer on their financial profit, but to steer on the true profit, their real contribution to the well-being in society. And the world is changing rapidly. Impact, both from a risk management as well as from a growing market opportunity perspective, is becoming more and more central to the success of business. And this is further amplified by regulations such as the CSRD, which demand more transparency and accountability. So integrating impact in the heart of your decision-making is no longer optional. It's essential. But as Rens also mentioned, how do you do this? How do you move beyond merely measuring, reporting, and steering on financial information, which we're all rather comfortable with? And how do you integrate the full width of impacts, from climate change to biodiversity to resource use to human rights, at the heart of every decision? Now, let me give you a simple scenario. Let's say you are a supermarket that can invest 100,000 euros into a sustainability initiative in your value chain. And you can either invest it in two projects. Let's say project A reduces your land use by 15 acres, which is good for biodiversity. But you can also invest in project B, which reduces your carbon emissions by 1,500 tons. Which is the better option to go for? Which one is better for your business or for society? Well, I think the inconvenient truth is that's hard to tell. But what if we translate these impacts into the language of currency, by looking into the costs and benefits to society as a result of reducing these impacts? Then all of a sudden, there's a clear winner. And that's precisely the comparable, decision-ready impact information that business need today. And that's why we developed, together with Impact Institute, the Harvard Business School, the Rotterdam School of Management, and the Singapore Management University, the Impact-Weighted Accounts Framework, IWAF. And IWAF helps organizations to quantify and value their impacts, and allow them to integrate this impact information alongside financial metrics in your decision-making. And let me quickly run you through some key principles of impact accounting with IWAF. First of all, it's impact focused. So we don't look at outputs, the number of solar panels you may have installed, but really the impact you make on society, the change in well-being in society that you cause. And we look at impacts from this 6 capital perspective, including alongside financial capital, natural capital, social capital, human capital. And of course, impact doesn't stop at your doorstep. So we look at the full value chain and from a double materiality perspective. And we then translate this full set of most material impacts into the language of currency. And for negative externalities, we do that, for example, by looking at the cost of restoring the damage that you did, the cost for compensation, and the cost for prevention of reoccurrence. Now, by applying these principles, we can transform existing finance tools into powerful impact tools. We can transform a profit and loss statement into an integrated profit and loss statement, showing the true profit of an organization across all your capitals. And this, first of all, helps, also shown in the example before, to prioritize, to make trade-offs between different investments, between different impacts that you want to prioritize. Second of all, by having this holistic overview of your value creation in connection also with your financial value creation, you can grasp new business opportunities. And also helps with your risk management, because now you have an impression of the relative sizes of the various positive and negative impacts that your organization has on society. And in the new version of the impact-weighted accounts framework that we are launching today, we particularly zoom in on the versatility of the framework. And we'll delve deeper into that with a panel that we have here today as well. But to give you already some highlights, this valued impact information is useful for example, strategic planning to set impact targets, but also for your double materiality assessment, because when valuing impacts, all of a sudden you know the relative sizes of your impacts, which can guide you in identifying which impacts are material, which is particularly relevant for European businesses these days that are working on the CSRD. And it also helps with decision making. It allows you to transform traditional finance tools, such as return on investment calculations, into impact return on investment calculations, showing how many societal value you create per euro invested. And you can use this in a forward-looking manner, also replacing perhaps your net present value calculations into a net present integrated value calculation. And finally, it can also, of course, be useful for reporting. Now, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself with impact accounting, to get started with impact accounting, if only it's just a back-of-the-envelope calculation, because impact accounting provides the pathway for organizations to not just steer on financial profits, but also on your true profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Werner, and join us for the panel, and join the 3 distinguished speakers that we have and that I shall introduce. So, first of all, Walter Bien, the Chief Financial Officer of Alliander, and Alliander being one of the main operators of the energy networks in the Netherlands and the developers of those networks. Then we have Erik Bukkens, Investment Director of the ABN AMRO Sustainability Impact Fund, ABN AMRO being one of the 3 big banks in the Netherlands. And we have Adriaan de Groot Ruiz, who is the one who started in 2012 through Price and developing this methodology and now being the Executive Director of the Impact Institute since 2018. So, welcome. Maybe, Walter, if I can start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about how Alliander has, started to work with these, this impact management, impact measurement approaches, and what your experiences are with that?
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Rens. Alliander has already started working with impact accounting in 2017. So in the Netherlands, we are one of the first companies to do so. And if I look at our journey, I think you can divide it in 3 blocks. The first block is to really develop the 6 capital methodology. The second block is to make it stable, so it can be used for external communication and also internal discussion. And the third block, and that's where we now, is to go from reporting towards steering. And I think if I start with the first block, it took us time to really develop the methodology of measuring along the 6 capitals. And I think we really made progress with that. And with that information, for me, it made it more transparent towards the company, that it could show from this is the impact of what we're doing. Because in the first few years, we saw that the outcomes were differing depending on the year, because we didn't have stable definitions. So that's important. And now we have made, I think, very good steps, also together with the Impact Economy Foundation. And now we are with a group of frontrunners, Dutch companies who really want to make the difference and go from reporting towards steering. We are developing the model and the business cases, the best practices of how to do this. And that is together with the Impact Economy Foundation and about 5 different frontrunners, Dutch companies. So that's a bit of our journey which we're on.
Yes.
Which is continuing. Maybe the last one to add, and then I'll give it back to you. Now together with CSRD, which helps in some way, definitely in the bigger picture, is how we combine what we already did with the obligations that are deriving from the CSRD framework.
Yes.
So.
And can you tell us what are the other companies that you're cooperating now with, your front runners?
Yeah, those are mainly infrastructural companies. So that is in the Netherlands GasUnie, that is Enexis, that is the Dutch company Stedin.
En NG Infra.
And NG Infra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a big part of the market actually. That's then using this this methodology.
Yeah, and so that we hope to set an industrial standard that we can spread out to other companies.
Yeah. And I think you said the first step was to actually get clear on definitions and how to do these measurements. Actually, how stable is that at this moment? Do you think is that sort of like developed completely, or is that still work in progress as well?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way. It's still work in progress. Also, the CSRD influences the way we set up our framework. So it is still work, but I think in general you can say that the basic framework of measuring is there. Yeah. And it's if you look at the 6 capitals, not all capitals can be easily translated into economic value. So that is a thing we also have to accept. Yeah, yeah. And the fact that you have been doing this for a long time already, that helps you with the obligations of the CSRD that you're getting now as a company, that all European companies are actually getting? That's a good question. In some way, it definitely helps, because people in our company are used to think in the spirit of impact meament. But what you see is that CSRD is pretty specific in the rules and the impact measurement. So it does. It's one of the tasks. What we do in the front runners group is how to combine both and to develop it into that you don't get. What we want to prevent is that there's 2 worlds: impact measurement and CSRD, and that has to go one way. And that is where the challenge is now. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We'll get back to you as well in the later discussion. Now, Erik Bukkens from ABN AMRO. I don't know from what year you started to have the impact reporting and then also the managing the impact. Can you explain how that has gone with ABN AMRO?
Yes, glad to do. Thanks, Rens. Well, actually, it's good that you mentioned that our mother, because we are the fund, we're the investment fund in impact, and our mother, the bank, has actually already started with the using the IWAF in 2018 for integrated reporting. I don't want to focus on that now, but we have that side of the business that was already looking at it. In our fund, I think we started investing with our first fund, the ABN AMRO Social Impact Fund, in 2012. From that moment on, we have actually been looking what should we do with impact measurement. There were so many methods in the market, and most came from the heart, so to say. And in practical sense, we needed something where we could compare things. We needed something we could actually calculate with. But from a more conceptual point, we also thought that impact is also about value. It's about real value. It's about true value, if you will. And we found that actually in the IWAF approach, well, much in the way as Werner just started his conversation. We started working with that already a number of years ago, internally, looking how to shape this, and we actually launched our first report last year. This year, actually, within the next 2 weeks, we will be launching the fund with the results of 2023. We use the IWAF as a methodology to actually measure our impact. And it's very important that not only do we look at the 6 capitals, but we also are able in this way to look at, a spectrum of indicators, a spectrum of impacts that are all connected to, climate and the climate change that we try to control, and think of biodiversity, think of other elements in that climate. And I think we have come up with an integral way which can only be done, I think, with the IWAF to measure our impact and report on it. And then, indeed, we are also getting into the stage where we use it to steer, to help our companies see what actually is happening in their companies, in each of the single companies with their impact, where actually the impact risks are for them that they may not have seen before. And then we're able to actually manage that impact. And we're in that, pretty much getting into that stage where we're really in dialogue with our companies on the basis of our results, can actually show them, discuss with them what the next steps would be to even increase the positive impact.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So as a bank, of course, financial institution, you're able to actually ask companies to start using IWAF themselves as well. In that sense, spread that practice.
Yeah, well, yes, certainly. I think as ABN AMRO, and it's a bit like Alliander, if we as an organization, when we started to use this approach, I think it was quickly known in the market. And so we get a lot of requests on how are you doing this, why are you doing it. So we have also been in the international coalition of banks together with Harvard University and the Impact Institute to bring this methodology forward also in the financial world. So yes, we're also as a bank pretty much involved in that this is actually, as far as we are concerned, the only basis where you can work from if you want to work in a professional and let's say a workable way on impact and view it as real value where you can actually calculate with, and which really makes sense for entrepreneurs as investors and bankers. Yeah. To make sense of that, just like we have been doing for centuries with financial accounting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, so we've seen a lot of developments in terms of the methodology over the last couple of years. But I think, as Walter also was saying, we're at this exciting moment where we need to go from the measurement to actually the management of these impacts. So to both of you, the question: do you have already an example of where this actually worked out? That you can say, like, well, we took a different decision here because we had these insights from the impact measurement. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
have several examples, so it's maybe nice to pick out one. For example, we in our work we use a lot of generator. When there's a power, when there's maintenance for in the electricity grid, we often use a generator. And if we would look in a traditional way of what kind of generator to use, we came to a certain type. But what we did with the 6 capitals, we also looked at, because they're often in rural area or in areas where people live. So they have emissions, they make noise, and if fuel use. And if we would measure the integral and all the different elements, we came to a different type of generator. It's in traditional way, it's more expensive. But with measuring the other impacts, we said, hey, we have to take this one because it just it gives less CO2 emission, makes less noise. And so that's a small example, but then that we made a different choice. And so we have many more, but I think this is a nice example. And
so you made another choice where you were actually having bigger benefits on the other dimension, so to say.
Yeah.
But on the financial dimension, you were actually losing out a bit.
Yeah. We pay a little bit more, but if you look at it on the total impact of this generator, we made a different choice.
Yeah. And you didn't get into a fight with your chief financial officer, because that's you yourself.
It's me myself. That helps.
But and your shareholders, they were okay with this as well?
Yeah. I think, and that's a discussion. This framework makes it possible to explain why you make the choice. And also our shareholders understand that we look broader than only financial impact. So that's, I think, where impact accounting is important. It helps us to tell our story. So yes, they do, and you always have to be. And of course, there's limits to everything, but also our stakeholders understand, or shareholders understand it, and they also understand that we are not only there for the shareholder, but for all stakeholders. And I think that's exactly what we do here.
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you. Erik, do you want to give an example from ABN AMRO's practice?
I could give an example. I have to be a bit careful because, of course, we work with our companies, and I wouldn't like to expose our companies because there's also a kind of confidentiality. I think there was one example, possibly viewable for the viewers at home. There is a company, Fairphone, that we work with, and let me just bring it a bit more generic. Fairphone is a company that people may know. They make smartphones and they try to make them as sustainable as possible. And there's a lot of layers of impact that is being made there. We see, and we are taught so, that positive marginal impact is usually the reduction of the negative impacts made. Now, in a smartphone, there's a lot of negative impacts in terms of the components, in terms of the life cycle of so the waste, in terms of the production processes. So there is social impacts in there, there's environmental impacts, and there's a huge CO2, let's say, climate impact there. Bringing the figures to life for a company like Fairphone really specifically points out where in all these processes and in the components the biggest impacts or negative impacts are made, and where the biggest reductions have already been realized, and where more reduction of the negative impacts can be realized. And Fairphone is really acting on that in several ways. They were already. They are really born with impacts in their minds. But it led them, for instance, and not only our measurement, but the realization that you know exactly where the impact is made can lead you to do exact actions. Like, for instance, Fairphone, even before we were measuring it, has established the international Cobalt, not foundation, but a Cobalt platform, where they work with other companies worldwide to see how they can improve the circumstances in the cobalt mines. You know, these kinds of elements. If I could name a few other companies, like let's talk about lithium in batteries and all that. If you bring forward that these risks in these lithium batteries in these mines are quite big, and that you do save a lot of CO2 by using electrified cars, for instance, it points out that you also have to look at these lithium batteries and the way lithium is, and it helps the entrepreneurs to see how much these societal costs actually are, and that is the strength, because all of a sudden the negative impacts become part of the cost price of a product. It's part of the cost price of a battery that the circumstances in the lithium mines are not so well.
Yep.
And I think that triggers the mind of any entrepreneur and an investor to start doing something about it.
Yeah.
It's also quite interesting because you can see in the figure, I think, that the Fairphone is then doing 65% better than market average, which is usually a figure that you can't really sort of pinpoint, right? So it really also brings...
It really shows you what is really happening if you start even starting with making inroads into these areas where there's so much negative impact. Yeah. You very quickly make a difference.
Thank you. That's a great example. Then I would like very much to go to Adriaan de Groot-Ruiz, who, well, if we talk about experience with using this methodology, we need to be with you. You've been working with this, developing it actually from 2012, and working with a lot of different companies. So what can you tell us about what you've seen happening with other organizations, and maybe also specifically how the current regulation around CSRD is impacting the use of the impact-weighted accounts framework?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rens. So perhaps the reason why I, together with Michel Scholte, my co-founder, started this was when I was around 13, 14. So we got interested in wave motion power. So we built a wave motion power generator to convert waves into electricity. I was just talking to Walter about that. And then, well, we got some seed funding, won lots of prizes, European prizes, were at the World Expo. But then we found out there was no business case. And then I realized that it wasn't the renewable technology that needed re-engineering, but the financial system, because we couldn't express the value to society, but also to investors that technology could bring, because investors weren't thinking about renewable energy. They couldn't think, why is this interesting? So that was the origin for me. And with, well, very smart people who helped us develop this methodology, together with lots of, well, companies who were willing to do something new. And I think what you've seen since 2017, and that's also with front-running companies like ABN, Alliander, but also AkzoNobel, others, developing, and that was journey, how can you use a method to manage? And now you see in, well, very different sectors, quite a lot of applications. For example, with Singapore Management University, with HOW, we worked with DBS, the largest bank in Southeast Asia, on how can they make good choices on their portfolio. For example, is it better to go from combustion engine, investing in that, versus renewable engine, if you take the whole life cycle into account, the battery, and not only CO2. And there we showed that it was like 30–40% better. And so then they could actually make that argument. But also in the Netherlands, like Zeeman, not a very traditional organization, people think about sustainability.
Zeeman, it's a textile.
It's a textile, and they're really like being prudent. And so they thought, from the idea of being prudent, how can we see that we can be prudent from a financial perspective, but also from a societal perspective? And you see quite a lot of these very practical examples. Now, one of the challenges that we see is that it's not super easy to do, and you need some skill to be able to do that. And for that, you need education, you need technology, and also incentives help. And there we see quite a lot of progress in the last time. For education, the Dutch Parliament, they have adopted that in high schools. It will be true pricing, so part of how you measure and monetize it will be part of the curriculum for secondary school economics students. So that will make the job easier. And we see quite a lot of professors incorporating the curriculum, like Dirk Schoenmakers in the University of Rotterdam. So that will make a big difference. In terms of technology, well, now we've developed a software so that, well, what we've been doing for 3 years with ABN, other investors can do in 1 year. And together with Preqin, that's the single or second largest provider of information to alternative investors, VC, private equity, LPs, GPs. They were just acquired by BlackRock. They have no information typically. And together with our database, they're launching an ESG platform. So in that way, what we've been doing, company by company, is now extended to thousands of companies. So that is a very important way to scale. And finally, about incentives, For example, in the food industry, to make it concrete, we have around $10 trillion of food that we buy per year across the globe. And the social and environmental costs, in terms of health, CO2, they're around 20 trillion. That's more than the GDP of the healthcare and the food sector combined. What are you going to do about that? There's a great opportunity. If you shift your diet, you can save like 5 trillion per year. But how are you going to do that? And well, Cornell University with New York State, with them we're doing a pilot on can you incorporate it in the public procurement so that a state can actually use this methodology in their procurement system. But then, you know, you have to make it very simple, very concrete. But are quite exciting developments. And that's something you didn't see, you know, 5 or 10 years ago. And in all of these things, having that pre-competitive standard, that is critical.
Yeah. Thank you so much. A lot happening, a lot of potential for scale up, and that's something that we will get back to in the second panel. Maybe Werner, for you, the very last question. What's the crucial things that you're going to look at for the next 5 years? What are your biggest expectations? Where do you think that most of the action is going to come from?
Well, I think that there are various. I think first of all, from the front-running organizations that we've seen with the infrastructure organizations in the Netherlands, but we see more and more clusters of organizations, international impact investors, pension funds that are really sort of pioneering this, and I think really collaborating on this, so that you share, let's say, the learning money and also quickly go through this impact journey is, I think, essential for the further scale this practice. And I think next to that, we mentioned it already a couple of times, the CSRD, which is key for transparency. But I think we all know reporting alone will not change the world. So I think it's also vital that we work on incentives based on the impact transparency that we get from the CSRD. And that is something that we find very important, so that, let's say, staying on the true profit also becomes the most profitable thing in the market and not just the morally correct thing to do. And that is what we definitely aim for.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thanks to all the participants of this first panel. We're going now to the second keynote of this webinar, and that's from Peter Bakker, someone who speaks every day to CEOs about the impact of their companies, trying to push them to measure it better, but more importantly also to manage it better. Peter Bakker is the president and the CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Please, Peter Bakker.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Rens and Werner, for having me. Great to listen into the panel just now and listening to the progress that you guys are making. I'm very happy to be here. This is truly an issue not only close to my heart, but really the unlock to scaling solutions for the challenges that the world needs, now has. And obviously these challenges are well known, whether it's climate change, loss of nature, or mounting inequality. There's a lot more that is now important to us in the world than just financial returns. In WBCSD, the organization that I lead, we work with more than 250 companies, a very sizable part of the global emissions. We have a vision that we need to move to a world where we have 9+ billion people all living well within planetary boundaries. And these planetary boundaries, they were actually in the news this morning because the Earth Commission has issued its latest research. And if you pick it up from the internet, you'll find it's not happy reading. Obviously, climate change is now the most urgent of these issues. We have 5 more years left before we hit the dangerous 1.5 degrees threshold. You see the intensity of weather events everywhere now really hitting hard. But like I said, it's not just environmental issues. We also, as business, need to really concern ourselves with the social issues more and more, because the reflection of that is instability in society, unpredictable political outcomes in elections, and that just makes the whole operating environment for business a lot harder. But you don't need me to preach on these issues. I assume that everybody who dials into a call on impact accounting has gotten that memo. But it's really interesting to ask yourself, what is stopping us from taking action at much larger speed and scale than the world seems to be doing now? And in our analysis at WBCSD, one of, if not the key barrier, is the misalignment between the financial markets and the real economy when it comes into pricing in the risks and the opportunities related to climate, nature, and inequality. The singular focus that we have in mainstream financial markets on financial returns, without taking these other impacts into account, is not going to make us successful in dealing with the alarm bells that scientists are ringing for us. So we need to identify, assess, and disclose climate, nature, and social-related impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities in order to integrate that into business decision-making, but then subsequently to have decision-useful information going to capital markets so that investors can integrate it there. And that obviously is where impact accounting is going to play such a key role. It's not just in the reporting cycle that we need to do this. That's the, I think, mistake that has been made in prior years where we talk about integrated reporting and disclosure frameworks. We really are now at the stage that we need to integrate these elements into governance, into target setting, into obviously risk and performance management processes. And that really means that we need to work together on management accounting, finance teams to really understand what are the effects, the impacts that business has on the wider community and societies in which we operate. And that will require an alignment of incentives, of scale, to scale the business solutions that we know are out there. And I think the end vision remains the same for me. We win this game, we get to speed and scale of solutions once sustainable businesses will attract a lower cost of capital. If we truly are able to price in, to value the impacts of a business and reflect that in its risk profile, and then subsequently make that land in the lower cost of capital, then we will break through and sustainability will become part of the way we do business, will attract the right economic incentives. We know, obviously, that negative impacts and externalities are massive and they accumulate and they become systemic risks. Look at the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. The shift from a long-term, distant risk is now becoming near-term physical risks. And in terms of impacts, my argument to my members is, and I'll meet them again in a few weeks in the Climate Week in New York, is that many companies are now able to talk about transition risks, how to move from where they are to where they need to go. Very few companies, if any, are able to talk about the physical risks in their supply chains in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's one example of companies not yet fully embracing or understanding the impacts they have, but subsequently also the impacts that Mother Nature will have on their operations. And we know these numbers are massive. S&P Global Broad Market is responsible for more than almost 4 trillion of unpriced environmental costs. But there has been studies in the food system where the externalities, either in health or in environmental aspects, are much higher than the economic value that the food system actors are able to generate. So we must build better market and regulatory mechanisms to really internalize these externalities that can bring not just the cash flow, but also the true value or the true cost, as Adrian always says, into the radar. And this is not about just pricing negative impacts. We need to also look at what are the positive impacts. How can innovative solutions, products or services deliver nature positive or decarbonization at scale? And we work with companies who calculate their avoided emissions, and those are massive numbers of emissions through innovation, through new solutions. And how do we recognize the value of those efforts when we talk about products, but also when we talk in capital markets? So I think it's important that we make this system an integral system. We have greenhouse gas protocol on how you measure your greenhouse gases. We now have CSRD and ISSB on how you're going to disclose it. And then the additional layer of impact accounting will be able to translate that into impacts, into true costing. And that will be a major unlock for the conversation with capital markets. One health warning from my point of view, and then I'll move to the end of this, is we need to understand that the operating environment for business is incredibly complex as we speak. There's economic pressures, there's geopolitical tensions, the capital markets are still short term. We easily talk about CSRD, and the very large companies amongst us will be able to deal with that, but there's a whole host of companies that have no idea yet where to find the data and comply with CSRD. So we're in this risk of now really beginning to focus on compliance instead of what are the impacts and how do we improve those. And that means that whatever we do with the new framework for impact accounting, it has to become an integrated system from greenhouse gas protocol to a disclosure to an impact, so that we get a standard that we can all apply, so that companies' performance becomes comparable, and that we begin to really integrate that into the mainstream capital markets, because that's where the battle will be won or lost when it comes to the transition that we all need. So thanks for having me. It's really a unique moment to bring everybody together. It's really important that we shape this system together, that we find the right measures and values that matter for people and planet, that is recognizing the science and the urgency that is bringing to us. So thank you again, and I'm handing back to Rens.
Thank you very much, Peter Bakker, for showing so strongly the urgency and the steps forward. And that's exactly the topic of the next panel, which is about from niche to mainstream, how to accelerate the adoption of impact measurement and management. And for that we go away from, well, I'll stay here in Amsterdam, but we're going to travel to Brussels, we're going to travel to Beijing and Singapore, where we have our three wonderful panelists to talk about the key actions, the leverage points, the policy interventions that are needed. Well, I'll start with Leslie Kapin from Astanor, where she is a partner, where she's director of impact, and Astanor Ventures is an impact investor. Tech meets nature, I saw on your website, and you're investing in Europe and beyond. Leslie, I know you are working on an initiative specifically focused, I think, on Europe, the Impact Valuation Hub. Can you explain a little bit to us what you're doing there?
With pleasure, and thank you for having me today. It's great to be here. So before to tell you about the hub, I'll tell you a little bit shortly about the history. As an impact investor, we realized from the start that we had to find a way to communicate to our investors and to better manage the impact of our portfolio companies on a day-to-day basis. So we thought about how to do it. We initially set really clear impact KPI around the people on the planet, about the avoided emissions, about the positive impact on nature, and the increase of livelihood of the farmers and the consumers as an agri-food investors. But the problem that we had was that it was kind of really hard to explain then to our investors that, we avoided X tons of carbon emissions, we reached 10,000 farmers, and even if it was positive, it was hard to grasp if we've done a good job as an impact investor. And so from this point, 3 years ago, we started to think about how we can translate all these heterogeneous indicators into one single value. And this value being, again, monetary value, because that's what also people understand, and especially investors. So we started 3 years ago to translate all our net positive impact into a monetary value. Definitely not been an easy exercise, and we had the support of an amazing consultant called Valuing Impact that really helped us frame this. So we really leveraged all the language, all the different framework existing, but when you want to put it in-house, practically, it's not that simple to do. So we had to spend a lot of time and effort. And it's never been the point to keep this work for ourselves, because clearly the point is to be able to bring into other impact investors and to compare each other. So when we start thinking about how can we bring that to others, it was extremely difficult to find a practical way to do it from us to them directly. So we start thinking, okay, how can we bring joint forces together? We're not the only impact investors doing impact valuation, impact monetization. So let's find these other impact investors around the globe and try to form a group that can bring this content to the other impact investors who want to start their journey on impact valuation. So now for about a year, we've been bringing investors around the table, and we've been bringing associations around the table to start thinking of how can we frame that for a bigger group. And exactly as you said, we are in the process of launching the Impact Valuation Hub, which is a hub hosted by SVI, Social Value International, and we have the pleasure to have IFVI as well as Capital Coalition as observers, and to have a Value and Impact Institute as well as knowledge partners. And the whole ambition of this hub is to really bring impact investors around the table, because it's clearly not perfect yet what we have been working on. It's not perfect, but it's a great start to measure impact, to be able to tell to all investors, we've done a good job. We've been able to give you a return on your investment, like a 2x or a 3x, but we've been able to provide an impact on return on impact, so 3x or 5x on this. So really being able to report both on our financial success and on our impact success. And more importantly as well, it's not only about reporting to our investors, it's more importantly to support all portfolio companies to become more impactful, to support them by providing them their impact unit economics in monetary terms, to say, if you do that, you will further improve your impact unit economics. So it's really the double value add of doing impact valuation as an impact investor, is really to be able to truly measure your impact, and more importantly as well, to support your portfolio companies in their sustainable journey.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And you're using the word impact investors. In what sense do you think that all investors are impact investors? And how do you see that changing? I know here in the Netherlands, we have actually our biggest pension funds, and well, we're here at one of the biggest banks, ABN AMRO, and they're all involved in setting impact goals and measuring that. And how do you see that in the rest of Europe? Does everyone become an impact investor, or are we still far away from that?
It's definitely not mainstream yet, but it's gone away from a niche. So I think there's more and more impact investors that want to become impact investors. And that's why, you know, sometimes you want to become one, but you don't know how to become one. So actually starting to measuring the impact that you have with the investment that you've made is extremely necessary. And I'm extremely impressed by the work of ABN AMRO on this. And I would love to have ABN AMRO to join the Impact Valuation Hub, because we need those bigger players that have been doing impact valuation for a longer term. So the point is not only actually to have impact investors, we're happy to welcome anyone that wants to share, because the whole point is that there's so much out there, and we want to make sure we collaborate today, because it's still a niche topic or an early topic, and there's a big momentum. So it's a good time to make sure we sit around the table, agree on the metrics, agree on the approach, and bring a practical tool for everyone to scale their impact.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I hope we have time to get back a little bit to you again. But now I would like to introduce Gu Qing from the Ford Foundation, where she is the Senior Program Officer of the Beijing office on working on philanthropy and sustainable finance. Ms. Gu, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you tell us what the Ford Foundation, what you are doing to foster the practice of impact investing in Asia?
Sure. About 7 years ago, when the Ford Foundation launched its mission-related investment program, the Ford China office is the first few regional offices committed to impact investment. We are a pioneer to bring impact investment to China and the other emerging economies in Asia. So we are a grant-making foundation. Our grant-making is in a context in China and more broadly Asia-Pacific, where 320 million people live at the bottom of the wealth pyramid. the demand for leverage more private capital to address social and environmental challenges is huge. However, today, nearly 3/4 of investors are based in North America and Europe. Only 30% of the volume of impact funds is raised for projects in emerging markets. This means that impact investing in Asia is coming from the global north with it, the power of how impact investing should go. These structures of power takes a new significance, where money overwhelmingly flow from the global north countries to global south countries and back out again. As you may know, the Ford Foundation's mission is reducing global inequality. So we want to do something to change this power dynamics in impact investing. So in our grant making, we try to strengthen the impact investment in China and other emerging economies. And we urge China's overseas finance and investment to adopt the impact investment strategy so that we can hold China more accountable to bring positive social and environment impacts to local communities in the global south. Just quickly to give you a hint of the program we did to facilitate the impact investment growth. One is that we incubated the impact investment field builders. For example, the Global Steering Group has an impact partner program in about maybe nearly 40 countries now. So we incubated the National Impact Partner under the GSG in China and call for collective action with regional stakeholders as well. And then the second breakthrough is that we cultivated the impact investing talents and the policy-informed research in Asia, like the partnership we are having now with the Singapore Management University. This is based on the assumption that individuals and talents are drivers of change. We are a pioneer to impact investment and sustainable finance into the curriculum of business schools, launched columns in leading financial media, and compiled the first set of textbooks on sustainable finance in Chinese universities. So I'll pause here to share what we have achieved for the impact investment ecosystem building in China and in Asia.
Yes, Ms. Gu, thank you so much. Maybe a short follow-up question on your introduction. You're working both within China and broader in Asia. Do you see that there's differences between those countries, and are there certain places where you say, well, that's clearly where we see that the front runners when it comes to impact investing are?
Yeah, I see some difference because, you know, our grant making work firstly originates and based in China. We first incubate the China-based ecosystem for impact investment. However, we feel that actually in China, the majority of the investors are retail investors, not the large institutional investors. So at the current stage of the market, financial return is a priority when weighing the impact and the financial return. So this may because of the different development stage for the impact investment movement. And also, I think in China and also in broader Asia market, ESG investing is a more predominant idea than impact investing, especially in China, driven by the dual carbon goals and the net zero commitment. The mainstream in ESG investing is predominant. And also the China policymakers, they are still learning and assessing what kind of policy incentives they should have for incubate more impact investment in the country. And also more recently, because of the economic downturn in China, we see a clear capital flow to other Asian markets Hong Kong and Singapore are the rising hubs for the financial flow. And I believe that the investment through these hubs to the developing world in Asia, like the ASEAN countries, maybe will be the next driving force for the impact investment movement in Asia. So our grant making also follows this development trajectory. And we are also confident that the impact accounting has a great value and significance in help us to address these challenges in the Asian market.
Okay, thank you so much for these insights, and we're actually now going into one of your grantees, I think, which is Dr. Liang Hao, Professor of Finance of the Singapore Management University, also co-director of the Singapore Green Finance Center. And what I need to tell, as being Rens van Tilburg, is Dr. Hao got his PhD at the Tilburg University in the Netherlands. So very happy to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit what you're doing from Singapore Management University to foster the adoption of the impact-weighted accounts framework in Asia?
Hey, thank you. Goedemorgen from Singapore. So I'm Hao from SMU, and we have been partnering with Impact Institute as well as Impact Economy Foundation to carry out several pilot studies, case studies, applying the IWAF framework to Asian organizations. I could give you a few examples. Recently, we engaged with one of the major real estate developer and investment company in Singapore, also in Asia, to measure the impacts of their operations on employees and on tenants. So it's like a social impact. We try to help them understand better, for the cost they incur with, paying employees, training employees, what's the societal gain as well as the organizational gain from the improved productivity, well-being of those employees. Another example is we work with one of the major banks in China on measuring their impacts of equity funds and fixed income funds. So this is going beyond organizational level impact, but more on the portfolio level impact. And for this, we work closely with Impact Institute, leveraging their global impact database, GID, as well as our own proprietary data from our partners. So we want to try to tell investors, for this amount of money you invest in these funds, what's the dollar or euro monetary impact you create to the society beyond financial returns. A third example is we are now partnering with a few European organizations on measuring biodiversity impact. Biodiversity finance, nature finance is now becoming a mainstream in this whole sustainable finance space. We know a lot about climate change, but not too much about nature ecosystem, especially how organizations' behavior affects the broader biodiversity and how the broader diversity risk affect organizations. The double materiality principle. We are just starting this, and SMU's role, led by myself, is to measure the impact. And I think more collaborations will happen as well with the Impact Economy Foundation. The fourth example is our university leadership at Singapore Management University learn about our IWAF pilot studies, and also want to apply the IWAF framework to measure the societal impact of our academic research. People always think academic research is a public goods, is a cost center, you consume a lot of funding and grants. Of course, the idea is you generate more value to the society, but not really in monetary terms. We try to bring this into a monetary term, right? So for this amount of grants that you provided to a university to support research, we actually contribute to the improved productivity in the society, improve the GDP per capita, improve well-being, and we basically draw from the academic literature to provide parameters for all this impact measurement. And just want to emphasize that this is also in collaboration with the Impact Institute, and we are now close to having a final report. So these are the things that we have been doing. Happy to share more later on about the details.
Thank you so much, Professor Liang. And I would love to hear more about this, but unfortunately, looking at the clock, we need to be wrapping up. So all panelists, I would like to thank you very much for your participation, your insights. And I think what this webinar has shown, that is that impact is no longer something that is nice to have. Actually, it is a must to have. And also that we are at this very crucial stage where we can go from reporting about impacts to really steering on impact. And we've seen great examples of what's already happening in practice. We've seen what's happening in Asia, broader in Europe, in order to scale up this use of the impact-weighted accounting framework. And if you are inspired by this webinar, please go to the website of the Impact Economy Foundation and get into contact. Lastly, we're going to end with the final keynote speaker, who is definitely worth waiting for, Paul Polman, who is the author of the book Net Positive, co-founder of Imagine, but also, of course, very well known as the former CEO of Unilever, one of the very first really big companies that started to really put impact first and start to manage that. So thank you very much for your attention, and please also after the presentation of Paul Polman, fill in the short survey about this webinar. So there will be a link that you can click on. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, hello everyone, and many thanks to Werner and the Impact Economy Foundation team for bringing this incredible webinar together. I am enormously proud to be a member of the advisory board and an advocate for the pioneering and crucial work that you all do. In my role as business leader, campaigner and writer of a book called Net Positive, one thing above else becomes increasingly clear. Meaningful solutions to our greatest challenges will only be achieved through collaborative partnerships, just like this one. That is Net Positive at work in action. As the global community gradually wakes up to the negative impacts of business as usual, the IEF stands out as a beacon for sustainability, advocating for a paradigm shift towards an economy that balances profit with purpose and, above all, real impact. The IEF is building the tools we need to answer, in my opinion, the most important questions for business leaders, questions we also pose in our book Net Positive. How can we profit from solving the world's problems, not creating them? And is the world truly better off because our businesses are in it? Yes or no? Financial performance has long been the dominant metric of success, perhaps the only metric. Profit margins, quarterly shareholder returns, market shares, they've driven corporate strategies and decisions. All too often, in my opinion, at any cost, to the benefit of a few and, frankly, the detriment of many. Yes, these metrics are important, but they unfortunately paint an incomplete picture. They fail to account for the environmental and social cost of business activities right across the value chain. Business can no longer ignore the negative externalities of their actions. They must begin to align their operations with broader societal goals, reversing the devastating effects of climate change or biodiversity destructions, and addressing the underlying issues of inequality, and above all ensuring the health and well-being of all stakeholders. We still live in a world of CSR, corporate social responsibility, by the ethos of doing a little less bad instead of doing more good. Yes, we can pat ourselves on the back for cutting down 5 less trees yesterday, or celebrating a little less plastics in the oceans or carbon in the atmosphere. But to what end? World Overshoot Day this year was August the 1st. That's the day when we start to use up more resources than the world can replenish. I would argue that after that date, we indeed start stealing from future generations. Our linear, destructive production and consumption model of take, make and waste truly has come to an end. We simply cannot have unlimited growth on a finite planet, and anything you can do forever is by definition unsustainable. CSR, or less bad, is indeed still bad. So we need to move to RSC, responsible social corporations, or what we call regenerative, restorative, reparative business models. An enormous opportunity and increasingly more profitable as well, as we position our companies for the greener, more inclusive and equitable future we all aspire to, versus the destructive brown economy of the past. This moment requires us to raise the ceiling on what we are capable of, on our responsibilities to the wider world. When we first launched the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, at the beginning of my tenure as CEO, we were exploring uncharted territory. Sustainability was still in its infancy. We believed it was the right thing to do for the business and for all of our stakeholders, but we didn't have the evidence. Fortunately, we were proved right, I'm happy to say. But at that time, we lacked the data, the analysis, the tools that IEF now provides to truly show that it has value-creating potential, and to help us guide the decision-making when facing the many trade-offs. And yet, though many companies are leaning into ESG, the scale of change simply isn't where it needs to be. Sustainability remains for many a box-checked or nice-to-have. But make no mistakes, regardless of pressure coming from new regulatory frameworks, customers and employees, and I believe also other stakeholders, are increasingly concerned about the products they buy and the companies they buy from. Technology, regulation and signals from the marketplace are driving the change already. Standing still is not an option anymore. But whilst we're moving, we're simply not moving fast enough. We have to accelerate and scale. An exponential challenge requires an exponential solution. With the greatest wealth transfer in history, worth about 70 trillion, the companies that flourish will be the ones that lead, that innovate, that stand out in an increasingly crowded marketplace. The impact-weighted accounts framework developed by the IEF provides a clear and quantifiable measure of a company's social and environmental footprint. This transparency builds trust and enhances a company's reputation and attracts socially conscious consumers, employees and investors keen to support increasingly responsible business. There is a saying that comes to mind: money makes the world go round. How true is this? But right now, money continues to drive the world in the wrong direction. We have it within our power to change this. Many would argue that climate change or inequality or biodiversity destruction are merely symptoms of a bigger crisis, a crisis of greed, of apathy, of selfishness. What we now need is a complete mindset change to successfully address the challenges that lay ahead. We must begin to view the shift not as a burden but as a price, not as a cost but as an investment, not as a risk but as an opportunity. Nothing is easy, but give me a better alternative. It starts with courageous leadership for each and all of us. Sustainability indeed isn't the cost of doing business. Sustainability is the future of modern business. I urge everyone here today to embed the principles exemplified by the IWAF, to be the early adopters, the disruptors, the pioneers. Your business would be so much better for it. And as I like to say, it's better to make the dust than eat the dust. Thank you all very much for your attention, but above all, for what you're doing.